But I mean, you do have to meet people where they are, right? I mean,
Yeah, great point.
it's funny. A lot of people criticize me because most of my articles, videos, whatever, I talk about how Bitcoin could double, triple, 10x, 100x, 1000x, depending on your time horizon, right? And, most people not
Not there yet.
obsessed with Bitcoin
Yeah.
would look at that and say, "Oh my goodness, Luke, you're an idiot for saying $100 million of Bitcoin." Most of the Bitcoiners would say, "Oh, Luke, you're ridiculous for trying to price it in dollars." I can't make everyone happy, obviously. That's not
Right.
the point. But you have to meet people where they are, right? And for people to understand, oh, Bitcoin's better for the world's poorest, first you have to understand why is it valuable. And for it to be valuable, you have to communicate to people in the system they think that is value, right? And if most people, their unit of account is dollars, and so you got to communicate to them in that, right? He is emotionally biased to the dollar as his unit of account. If you're talking to an American and saying, oh, the Venezuelan stock market is at an all-time high, or the Turkish stock market's an all-time high, they'd say, Luke, you're being intellectually dishonest, right? The only reason the stock markets in Venezuela, Turkey, Argentina, Sri Lanka are skyrocketing is because the currency you're valuing it is collapsing. The stock market didn't go up 100x in Venezuela. The currency went down 99.9%. You got to meet people where they are. They are emotionally attached, pricing the S&P 500 in terms of dollars, their unit of account, and then mocking Bitcoin in that same unit of account. And therefore they get to inaccurate conclusions. If you really peel it back, you realize you're not saying anything objective here. You're just saying that in my perspective of the dollar unit of account being the best, this is better, right? But there's no objective reason to say the dollar is the best unit of account. You got to consider everything, including Bitcoin, as a subjective unit of account. And then once you do that, try to perceive which subjective unit of account is most accurately communicating prices in the world. And then when you realize that's Bitcoin, that's where you kind of get into the objectivity, I would argue, of it, right? All units of account are subjective, but the one that is most accurately pricing the world is the one that is the closest to objective reality. Most people, where they are, is that they're pricing everything in terms of dollars, and they don't yet understand the unit bias to dollars that they have because we've been living our entire lives with it. You gotta communicate to them Bitcoin's valuable, and you got to do it in terms of dollars because that's where they're headed. Then once you do that, then you can graduate to, oh, well, we can price it in bolivars, and we can price it in pesos. Oh, we can also price it in oil and gold and houses. And then, you keep going, and then that's when you get to that epiphany that the dollar, pricing Bitcoin in dollars is an oxymoron, but most people aren't there yet.
Mr. Luke Broyles, thank you so much, sir, for coming on today, being a playable character in this sea of non-playable characters. I'm very excited to have you today. Thanks, brother.
Happy to be here.
So
virtually.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. We've shared some time together just over the last couple of years. Just whether it's lunches or conferences, stuff like that. For those that don't know your story, just kind of getting into Bitcoin, there's all kinds of people, whether it's old and they've had to humble themselves and their system is all backwards now, or young people that are coming in and maybe there's not as much relearning, or unlearning, I should say, but there's still a relearning process. What has that been like for you over the last handful of years, just kind of going through this fiat to Bitcoin transition?
I think everyone has their own journey, right? I think a lot of people don't care about Bitcoin. I think Bitcoiners, we all have our biases, right? That's why we need Bitcoin. Bitcoin separates human bias and emotion from money, right? But I think Bitcoiners need to take a step back and realize most people don't care about money, right? Most people, most Americans do not care about money. They don't care about saving. They don't care about retirement, right? So that's the first problem, right? Before you get people to care about Bitcoin is better money, like we got to remember most people aren't ready to be orange pilled because they don't even care about money, right? And so I was always different in that even when I was a teenager, I cared about money and retirement and all that, and like saving money, right? A lot of that is I think is my film background because I used to do movies, and those movies would have thousands or tens of $1,000 budgets, which is a lot for a middle schooler or young high schooler, right? And so I was used to money. I was used to spending money, paying people, doing a project. But I realized that I need to save money. I need to, save for my retirement, right? I understood compound interest. I understood the importance of saving money in my teenage years, right? I was big into stocks and mutual funds, especially. My grandfather passed on, left me a few $1,000. And, I was like, what do I do? My parents never really taught me about money, right? Which is fine. But I tend to be a little obsessive with the truth. I want to know the truth. I want to do my best to find it. And so I just started reading about finance, about money. I did everything, right? I watched hundreds and hundreds, probably more like thousands of videos about finance. I read a lot of literature about financial advisors, what they do, what they recommend, portfolio theory, monetary history. I'm a huge history nerd, so of course, lots about history and the history of money. So all those things are really very unique, I think, for someone my age, right? And I'm not saying it to be arrogant. I'm just saying it because I think it's true. I think most people under 25 and probably even 30 just don't care about money at all. And then, most people even older than that, they don't care about monetary history. They don't care about what kind of money were people using 2,000 years ago, right? Most people only care about the last 30 to 50 years because they think that's all that matters to them, right? And so, I think I was very fortunate that I was gifted with the interest of things that most people aren't interested in, especially my age, because then I figured out Bitcoin few years ago, and well, I figured out Bitcoin was important years before that. It took me a few years to understand the implications of Bitcoin, all the nuance with it, and it does take time for people to learn that. But that's where I'm at now. I figured out Bitcoin, and I'm going to stick by that conviction as long as I believe there's not a way for humans to manipulate or control Bitcoin's network, right? As soon as I see that, I'm selling off all my Bitcoin instantly. And then I don't know what, probably gold. But I mean, I don't see that anywhere on the horizon, obviously. And I mean, to me, if Bitcoin is secure and decentralized, as long as it remains secure and decentralized, it's the most important monetary shift probably ever. But even if not ever, it's the fastest one by far, right? Monetary shifts took thousands of years, then they took hundreds of years. This one's going to take a few decades, right? And thank God it's not taking a few years, because if it did, that would probably mean chaos in World War III. But my hope at talking about Bitcoin and making content about Bitcoin is to make the transition, in my small contribution, as seamless as possible, right? And and again, I'm not saying this to be arrogant, but I'm saying this because to hopefully inspire other people. Is that just literal me? A few years ago, I thought, who's going to care about me, right? I'm a young 20-something-year-old. I got no money. I got no CEO experience. I don't have a big stack. I wasn't buying Bitcoin at $1. Like, I don't have the Lindy effect. I don't have the capital. I don't have the reputation. Like, who's going to listen to me? But I mean, just the work I've done, I know, for a fact, I've helped many people save their portfolios. I've helped people prevent losing their stacks. I've helped many more people understand Bitcoin to a deeper level. Some people understand Bitcoin for the first time. So, I mean, and again, that's not the same special. It's just to say it's a numbers game. If you got thousands of people and you do hundreds of consulting calls, I mean, once in a while you hear the story of this person that, saved money here, or this person there that was orange pilled because of me, quote unquote, even though I don't really believe that. But, so it's very humbling that tens of thousands of people in some minor way benefited from what the content I put out. Hundreds of people probably benefited in a major way. And there are dozens of people that have probably saved their retirements in some aspect because of what I've done, right? And again, it's not me. It's just that truth is truth, and the truth will set you free, right? And so the truth needs as many advocates for it as possible. And so that's how we got here, right? And so my hopes that going forward in the future, compound interest, and the same way with investment returns, it's the same thing with society, right? My greatest concern for the future is that the transition from political money to apolitical money results in political conflict and violence as the political powers of the ancient world cannibalize themselves into oblivion, right? That's my biggest concern. It's war, right? And so I want to do everything possible to help people understand Bitcoin is not a threat, it's an opportunity, right? And this is my, I don't want to say grievance, but this is my disagreement with many in the Bitcoin communities that, I think this whole tear the old system down, these people are evil and all that, even if it's true, I think we got to be as careful as we can with helping people understand that Bitcoin skyrocketing in price is not a pessimistic outcome. It's an optimistic one, right? Everyone on the outside says, oh, you just want $1 million Bitcoin because you want to see hyperinflation and mass starvation, right? It's like, I think we really got to kill that misconception. If we want people to adopt Bitcoin faster, adopt Bitcoin more willingly, and minimize the probability of my kids and your kids, Brandon, being in a trench, in a war or something horrible like that, right? And not just war. There's many other threats just as large, if not larger. But anyway, I suppose that's my story. I'm very fortunate. I was a nerd and I came across Bitcoin, and truth is truth. And I like to think Bitcoin is pretty objective. And now I'm just trying to help other people also see that. And hopefully my contributions multiplied by another 10,000 Bitcoiners manifest into some real world change.
It's really interesting, Luke. Honestly, I feel like a lot of Bitcoiners there's so much to unpack there, what you said. And I'm writing down multiple different avenues to kind of go here. But one of them that I just was thinking of is, like, I was a jock growing up, and I was, my story a bit, and, played hockey, and, you and I have different, backgrounds growing up. And I feel like that's the thing I keep coming back to, like Aladdin with Bitcoin trading cards, or BJ Dichter, who I do political Bitcoin hour with, like these different men that I work with, or women, and the people that you work with, Luke. Like, we all come from such different backgrounds, but Bitcoin, it brings us together because, like you said, truth is truth. And it brings these people that probably a lot of people, I would venture to bet that a lot of people in the Bitcoin space got along with a lot of people, like growing up, like in school, like they just got along with a lot of people. Doesn't mean they were friends with every single person, but they just got along with everybody. And that's what I feel like we have a bit now in this epoch of Bitcoin. So it's kind of interesting that you bring that out, because I was just thinking of that. And like you said, you kept, going with the truth is truth, which kind of come back to later a little bit with the spiritual aspect of it in a way. But you mentioned something earlier too, with the central banks, and how, I was saying this on Cafe Bitcoin earlier today, actually, ironically, like the G4 central banks, just all their currency printing, you add it up and you divide it by all the different assets out there, and it's just sideways, especially over the last 15 years. And it's just keeping up. And like you said, Bitcoin is the fastest horse in the race. And then you talked about explaining this process to people and helping people. In your mind, who do you think explains, like, the dilemma that we're in the best? Like, who's the person that you kind of, I think I know this answer, by the way, so I'm curious to see if I know who you're going to say, but who do you think kind of exemplifies this the best and explains this the best way for the average person to understand this problem we're facing, this transition?
We want to thank our sponsor. This show is presented by Bitcoin Trading Cards, an orange pill in a pack, making talking about things that normally make you want to cry fun and easy. The scarcest and most educational cards to ever exist. Available now.
I mean, the three names that come to mind are Jeff Booth, Alex Gladstein, and Michael Saylor. Yep. I mean, as some people would say, those names are cliche, but I mean, they're cliche because they're really good, right?
Booth was mine.
Michael,
Booth is number one, so I'm glad you said that number one. I thought you might say that.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, those three guys, I think, have very, I think all three of them approach universal pain points for people, right?
Yeah.
To me, even though in my videos and content, I resort much more to the number go up aspect of Bitcoin and the technical aspects of it, technological paradigms. I mean, really, the real heart of it that I think all the Bitcoiners really care about, if they're genuine, is, much more the Alex Gladstein humanitarian case, right? I mean, I think that's, it's just once that's like a whole nother level, right? When you can be in Bitcoin because number go up. Oh, wow, I'm making a bunch of money. Then you have more conviction when you realize, oh, it's not Bitcoin's rising, it's everything else is falling. Then you go a bit farther and you have the conviction that, oh, wow, this is the monetary singularity, blah, 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 blah. That stuff more people think's woo-woo. But then when you get to the end of that thread and you realize the human cost of the two technological systems, I mean, that's for lack of a better word, that's kind of when people get religious about it, right? Or obsessed. Mm-hmm. That's a better word. That's to me where people get obsessed, right? Where it doesn't matter if I lose money. It doesn't matter. I mean, that's where I'm at. Like, I don't care if I lose. Like, I don't care if I'm bankrupt. I don't care if I lose all my Bitcoin. I mean, it's just I want to have the maximum probability this thing succeeds, because I think there's going to be a tremendous amount of suffering if it doesn't, right? And there is still a tremendous amount of suffering today that doesn't have to occur, right? There's always going to be suffering in the world, but I don't. I think that's where people get obsessed about it, right? And I think over time, people on average, the average Bitcoiner is less obsessed, right? I mean, we are the early adopters. We are the very far end of the bell curve, right? So, I mean, I think on average, we're a little more obsessive and paranoid about it than most people will be. But anyway, I forget the question, but yeah. I mean, those are people that come to mind. Jeff Booth, Michael Saylor, Alex Gladstein, also Len Alden, Greg Foss, and others are really, really good. Larry Lepard, obviously, is a huge one, right? And those are all very valuable messages, right? Greg Foss has a wonderful message. Larry Lepard has a wonderful message. Len Alden is a wonderful message, and those are important messages. James Lavish, they're really important messages. But at the end of the day, frankly, I think most people are going to approach this via a much more technological or humanitarian component than understanding why, Bitcoin is a credit default swap on all sovereign debt, right? It's just that doesn't, people don't care, right? People care about, France is printing money and stealing money from 14 African nations. They're stealing child labor out of the Congo to make croissants in Paris. I mean, that's something people are going to care more about than the risk-free yield curve, whatever stuff.
Yes.
Which as they should be, right? So anyway,
I think you hit the nail on the head, and it's something that Jeff has been just in the last week or so. Some of the interviews he's done, at Cheat Code, everything, and just the way you can see him again iterating. We're all learning in different ways, and we're all doing it. I see you doing it. I see Jeff doing it. There's so many people out there, content creators, trying to, how can we keep retelling this story in a different way to catch a new person, right? And I think that's like the beauty of a lot of this, and it's selling in a way, story selling. And I think of like Dr. Jeff too, who his frame lately has been for a little while now, I guess, has been stop seeing number go up. It's not number go up. That's the framing, and that's what Jeff has been saying for a while. But like again, really hitting home on, you keep measuring in the fiat system, and you're confusing the hell out of people. Like you're really confusing people because they're like, wait, like is Bitcoin backed by dollars? Then like, why are you saying it's $100 million Bitcoin? Like what's going on? And like again, it's not number go up. It's prices going down. So I think that's like that big frame that you're getting at.
Well, yeah, but I mean, you do have to meet people where they are, right? I mean, this is
great point.
It's funny. A lot of people criticize me because most of my articles, videos, whatever, I talk about how Bitcoin could double, triple, 10x, 100x, 1000x, depending on your time horizon, right? And most people comment, or most normies, or I say normies in a loving term, most people not
there yet,
obsessed with Bitcoin, would look at that and say, "Oh my goodness, Luke, you're an idiot for saying $100 million is Bitcoin." Most of the Bitcoiners would say, "Oh, Luke, you're ridiculous for trying to price it in dollars." Blah blah blah. So I can't make everyone happy. Obviously, that's not the point. But you do have to meet people where they are, right? And for people to understand, Bitcoin's better for the world's poorest, you first have to understand why is it valuable. And for it to be valuable, you have to communicate to people in the system they think that is value, right? And if most people, their unit of account is dollars. And so you got to communicate to them in that, right? I went on a Twitter rant, which I don't normally do, but I did last night. There was this guy bragging about how he'd rather own the S&P 500 than Bitcoin. He posted a chart of S&P returns over the last 12 years. S&P's gone from 1,500 to 5,200 in 10, 15 years or whatever. And I went on this rant explaining to him, like, your argument makes no sense, right? You're criticizing Bitcoin because it's volatile, and you're using the price history of the S&P 500 to back your claim. But the problem is that if you want to be intellectually honest, Bitcoin's way outperformed the S&P 500 in the last 15 years. That's a fact. You can't deny that, right? And so, my rant, I get down to the fundamental problem that this guy, who is a very pro-traditional, dividend stocks, 60-40 portfolio guy, traditional finance, let's say, it's not that he's evil or stupid or dumb. It's just that he is emotionally biased to the dollar as his unit of account, right? If you're talking to an American and saying, "Oh, the Venezuelan stock market is at an all-time high," or the Turkish stock market's an all-time high, they'd say, "Luke, you're being intellectually dishonest," right? The only reason the stock markets in Venezuela, Turkey, Argentina, Sri Lanka are skyrocketing is because the currency you're valuing it is collapsing, right? The stock market didn't go up 100x in Venezuela. The currency went down 99.9%, right? And so my rambling point there is that most people, you got to meet people where they are. They are emotionally attached to pricing the S&P 500 in terms of dollars, their unit of account, and then mocking Bitcoin in that same unit of account. And therefore they get to inaccurate conclusions. If you really peel it back, you realize you're not saying anything objective here. You're just saying that in my perspective of the dollar unit of account being the best, this is better, right? But there's no objective reason to say the dollar is the best unit of account, right? You got to consider everything, including Bitcoin, as a subjective unit of account. And then once you do that, try to perceive which subjective unit of account is most accurately communicating to me prices in the world. And then when you realize that's Bitcoin, then that's where you kind of get into the objectivity, I would argue, of it, right? That all units of account are subjective, but the one that is most accurately pricing the world is the one that is the closest to objective reality, right? So anyway, my rambling point is that you got to meet people where they are, and most people where they are is that they're pricing everything in terms of dollars, and they don't yet understand the unit bias $2 that they have because we've been living our entire lives with it. And so you got to communicate to them Bitcoin's valuable, and you got to do it in terms of dollars because that's where their head is, right? Then once you do that, then you can graduate to, oh, well, we can price it in bolivars and we can price it in pesos. Oh, we can also price it in oil and gold and houses. And then, you keep going. And then that's when you get to that epiphany that everything's an exchange rate. And it always was. And my exchange rate is just as valid as yours. And most people, again, aren't there because they don't care about money. Most people don't even know what the S&P 500 is trading at. So how are they going to understand anything I just said, right? You got to meet people where they are. And the dollar pricing Bitcoin in dollars is an oxymoron, but most people aren't there yet.
Such a great point.
Anyway,
it is. It's such a
kind of a rant, but yeah.
No, it's a hey, that's what this is for, right? It's a gauntlet.
Yeah.
Right? It's a you have to go through, like I always tell people whenever they're either maybe some type of ejection, I can't think off the top of my head, but it's like we didn't just wake up one day, Luke and Brandon and all these other people and say, hey, I said an epiphany. The archangel Gabriel came down from Michael came down to me and he said buy Bitcoin, right? Like that's not how it worked. Like we had to go through a process. And you had to learn. I came from politics and playing hockey and very political and seeing that world of politics and sports. Then also literally being involved in politics in the 2000s, to gold and silver, to real estate, and then to, and I've told you some of my story. And then it's like, and then Bitcoin 5-6 years ago, where it was like, oh my gosh, like this was the solution. It was the life raft off the Titanic. All those things are on the fiat Titanic. Every single one of the things we just mentioned are on the fiat Titanic, and it's going down. Like I think it's really funny. Like the elections are basically trying to vote in a new captain of the Titanic. Like you've already hit the iceberg. Yeah. So like, what's that going to do? You get a different guy to get the captain of the Titanic. Good luck. You're still going to the bottom of the Atlantic. In saying all this, where do you think, so to give you, not the price predictions, but where do you think like Don Bay was just saying, like, again, or Dr. Jeff, like, hey, the halving, we're probably I wouldn't be surprised they have, price come down a little bit here, right around the halving, or maybe a little after the halving, and then things kind of go up. What is your macro sense of, not in the, price prediction and not 10 years from now, but what are you thinking like in the next 3, 6, 9 months, like the rest of this year? How do you see things in your mind kind of playing out?
I mean, I think up. I mean,
directionally.
generally, directionally up. I mean, I am very surprised we are trading where we're at. I mean, a year ago, I would have thought maybe by halving we're like 40 to 45 grand. But nope, we've been past 70 grand for like 2 months now. Like, what? I mean, I shouldn't be surprised, but I am. I'm continually impressed by how quick Bitcoin's changed the world. Because, a lot of people in Bitcoin say, oh, Bitcoin's going to change the world in the next 5 years. I'm like, okay, the dollar's not going to hyperinflate in the next 18 months. Like, chill out, right?
Yep.
But I think I'm consistently too conservative at times, though. Like, I was taken aback when Michael Saylor started buying Bitcoin. I was shocked when El Salvador announced it as legal tender 2-3 years ago. I thought, whoa, that's like a decade ahead where I thought any nation, including a small one, would adopt it. I've been to El Salvador twice. I'm surprised. Like I was there like a couple of weeks ago. I was surprised that they're already working on like 700 teachers or so. They're going to be teaching Bitcoin to schools. I mean, for a small country like that, that's like a significant number, right? I mean, you can do the math out. That means in like 10 years, a significant portion of their young working primary earners, in their 20s and 30s are going to be Bitcoin educated, probably working in Bitcoin or for Bitcoin startups. I'm like, what? Like I was shocked when I was in Guatemala. I was surprised by the local adoption there. I mean, ETFs. I'm shocked that the ETFs have already surpassed gold's boom years in the first years of the gold ETFs. I mean, like in every form. Like I shouldn't be surprised, but so I mean, I don't know. My gut would tell me that we hit 100 grand per Bitcoin, US dollars, late this year or early next year. And maybe that's not true. Maybe we have some sort of interest rate crisis or banking crisis in America. The dollar becomes incredibly scarce for a period of time as we wait for newly printed dollars to liquidate the system or to lubricate the system. So, maybe Bitcoin crashes. I'd be really surprised if it goes below 40 grand. There was a huge perception shift at 40 grand, and it was night and day. And I think it's probably because my opinion that we were going to have 40K by the halving was probably consensus. I think it's probably what most people thought because that's what we would have had previous cycles. So I think it's unlikely to go below 40. I think unlikely to go over 100, but I mean, I intentionally make my content to not make a prediction within a certain timeline because 40K is illogical, 100 grand a Bitcoin's illogical, $1 million is logical. I mean, there's 2 million sats per millionaire on the planet. I mean, it's like you don't have to be ridiculous. It's not ridiculous to say in the next 10 years, 1 in 10 millionaires, 7 million people are going to want some exposure to Bitcoin. You do the math with the Bitcoin exchanges, like, okay, that means they'll only get a few million sats, which at, the time of recording here at the halving is a few $100. I mean, you're telling me that even if 1 in 10 millionaires want, say, 1 to 5% allocation to Bitcoin, it's just like the math's insane, right? I mean, I think most people are scared of Bitcoin going down, but I think if most people were intellectually honest, they'd be scared of it going up. And I think that day's going to come. Maybe that's 15 years from now. I think it's less. But I think it's just going to start going up and it's going to freak people out, right? I mean, on a micro scale, we've already seen this in the last year, right? Everyone was kind of expecting, like I said, 30, 40, 50 grand in Bitcoin by halving. But then we hit 60 and 70 grand, a few weeks ago. People were really terrified. Or people that would call me up or reach out to me because they're just not ready for it. We're not emotionally ready for it. People, no. Oh my goodness, I was selling my business and I'm not selling it fast enough because, Bitcoin's doubled since I was going to sell it, or I'm selling my house for Bitcoin and Bitcoin's doubled, or I had it all in a single sig in my, buried in my mattress or whatever, or in my backyard. Just anyway. Yeah. So no, I don't have a price prediction because I don't really care. I mean, we could see maybe $100,000 Bitcoin this cycle. I think it's very likely. I mean, we could see $1 million this cycle. I mean, I really think that just because you do the math, the ETFs have stated how much they want to buy. They've stated what percentage allocation they have. We know for a fact how many coins are exchanges. So the only question is, are the Bitcoin lunatics and obsessed psychopaths that were in this since like $10 going to sell their coins to the ETFs? I don't think so. And if they do, then that's a much lower cycle, maybe $200,000 Bitcoin this cycle. If they don't sell, I don't know. I think it would be entertaining if Bitcoin went to $1 million this cycle and everyone says, oh my goodness, wow, all the Bitcoin bulls were right. This time really is different. Bitcoin's going up forever. It's never going to crash again. The ETF's money here, everyone ape in, right? At $1 million. And then it crashes 90% or 80% because everyone at the top says, oh, ETF money's here. 4-year halving cycle's broken. We've done a super cycle. This is it. And then it crashes. I mean, it's like Weimar Republic chart, right? I mean, anyway, I think Max Payne is extreme volatility. I think Bitcoin's going to get more volatile in nominal terms. I think it's going to double in half, and indefinitely. And the only people that should be worried about that are the people that get emotional with volatility. But the whole point of Bitcoin is to say humans can't tolerate volatility, right? I mean, I guess the whole reason we have fiat money, political money, the whole reason the Fed has mandates is because the Fed wants to manipulate things based on volatility of the economy, right? And so, if you can get over yourself, get over your volatility, and get off zero, I mean, you shouldn't care if Bitcoin goes to 10 grand or 10 million in the next 10 years. I mean, 10 million is way more likely. So,
Yeah.
Anyway,
it's wild. I mean, like, again, you made me think of a few different like things here. Like Bitcoin being scarier going up than it is down. Like, honestly, like I've really not gone down that rabbit hole, but I've felt that, I feel like
most haven't.
Yeah.
They're not ready. Most haven't.
No, I don't think any of us are ready. Truly.
No, I'm in endless. Yeah. It's people. Yeah. People are not ready for that. Even Bitcoiners, like, they're just not ready. Mm-hmm. And I mean, because I mean, to me, it shouldn't be that controversial of a thing to say, but it is, because we're all emotional, like myself included at one point. Right. Yeah, I'm still emotional. I make that clear. I still got my biases, but I was much more emotional with Bitcoin at one point. But I mean, it's like the Alex Jones scenario of, he had $50,000 of Bitcoin. Now it's worth $1 billion. His problem was that he wasn't bullish enough, right? He lost it all on the laptop or whatever, right? I mean, I think most Bitcoiners are crossing their fingers for a 10x, but they haven't even considered the possibility, what if Turkey comes out like 2 years from now, this cycle, right? Turkey comes out, a G20 nation, they're going to start printing lira for Bitcoin, right? I mean, like, holy cow, like that, forget El Salvador, forget anything else. It's like, I mean, Bitcoiners are not ready for one G20 nation to begin printing legal tender for Bitcoin. And that might happen 1-2 cycles out. Even if it's 3 cycles out, I mean, we're just not ready for it.
No, we're not. And again, like it's funny. You made me think of the other, or you kind of circle back to the other thing, the point I was just kind of make, which was this, how many coins are lost, or like that first epoch or two, you're looking at what, 10, 15 million coins that came into existence during those 2 epochs. A large portion of the coin of Bitcoin was mined during that period. And how many of those coins are lost? Or like the Alex Jones thing. So that's where I was thinking right before you said that. Like, there's a good segment of people that could sell to the ETF. And that's what we don't know. To your point, we don't know. Like, are they going to sell? And do they have access to those coins? We don't know. We don't know. And that's where, between the hodlers, the people that are like, hey, I've got my keys and I ain't selling because I believe in Bitcoin and I definitely don't believe in fiat currencies. Like, no one believes in fiat currencies, but people believe in Bitcoin. and that's the difference, right? Like, that's like, I've never seen anyone say, I'm going to hold my Bitcoin, or my dollar. No, you sell your dollar for assets. If you can, if someone can, they do. They sell it for an asset and trade it. They sell dollars to buy an asset with it because they don't believe in the dollar, which is opposite in Bitcoin. So it's amazing to see going forward who has the coins, who has the keys to their coins, how much of it is there. If they do, will they sell to ETFs? And maybe it's some of it. That's going to be fascinating. And this is the supply shock incoming, having everything. I mean, honestly, like you just said, man, the next epoch or so is going to be wild. Epoch or 2, it's going to be nuts.
Yeah, I've said this before. Jesse Myers has said this before. Michael Saylor said this before. So it's not. Maybe it's cliche at this point, but I mean, it's like Bitcoin being Manhattan or Bitcoin being the Homestead Act. It's like, you have the Western United States, let's forget the moral problem of the Native Americans that we slaughtered, obviously. But the metaphor, it still works, right? That, at one point, someone just shot off a gun and all the people in their wagons raced out and claimed their little parcels of land in Texas and, modern day Mexico and Wyoming. It was literally just a land grab, right? It's like, get your butt out here, get over the Mississippi, go out and grab the land. And then once the land was claimed, then that's when the prices really started going up. I mean, that's kind of where we're at with Bitcoin. That these first 15 years from Bitcoin going from 6 cents 15 years ago now to $60,000, right? Which is a 6 million X, or 10 million X, whatever. Well, something like that. But my point is that, like, we're at the near end of the period where all of the land just sitting there for free is grabbed, and now that the guns are silenced and all the parcels are claimed, now we actually start bidding up the remaining parcels on the market, right? Mm-hmm. Market cap is downstream of price, and price is set at the margins, right? So far in Bitcoin's history, we've not really had tight margins yet, and we're about to enter that where we have tight margins, right? Like, there's Bitcoin just sitting out there for free on exchanges, essentially for free. I mean, if you view fiat as worthless, like, essentially for free, right? I mean, it's like we're yet to end the land grab where all of them are claimed. Now we can start debating about what a fair market value is for those that are willing to sell, right? Because, right now, if I want to buy a bunch of Bitcoin, like if I'm a billionaire, I want to buy a bunch of Bitcoin, I don't have to force someone to sell it. I just have to get what's on the exchange, right? Because it's all just sitting there for cash. I got cash, it's on the exchange, boom, right? Yep. It's like the equivalent of, Manhattan is that, down, the south of the island of Manhattan's all built up. Oh, well, I'll just go get more land to the north of it, right? Yeah. I could just, pay a fiat fee. I get my, couple acres of land north of Manhattan, right? And that's what we've been doing these first 15 years of Bitcoin is we're chasing the industry up north, right? I mean, I was in New York City recently, and it just amazed me. I'd never been there before, but like just a tiny part of the island was inhabited for hundreds of years, right? And then it went up north. But I think that's where we're at. I think this cycle, or next cycle, at some point in the next decade or so, I think we just get to that point where we hit the end of the island of Manhattan, and we're like, oh, I can't just pay the city for this last acre of land. I got to look back south again instead of north. Mm-hmm. And now I got to convince somebody to sell their acre to me, right? And I think those are two wildly different markets. And I think, most more conservative people in Bitcoin say, oh, the 4-year halving cycle, diminishing returns, blah, blah, blah. Maybe that's true, but I think there's also the real possibility that, maybe it's not. We've never entered a bull market with supply and exchanges decreasing. Like, we've just not. That's just a fact. We've never had the ETFs approved. That's just, and so maybe diminishing returns is right, but I don't know. I think every, and that's the thing, people outside of Bitcoin, they think that, oh, you're crazy for saying $1 million Bitcoin. But it's like, even with diminishing returns, you get $1 million Bitcoin in 10 years? I mean, that's a remarkable return, right? But, I think that's just way too, I think the concept of diminishing returns is way too pessimistic. I think the concept of increasing returns makes more logical sense. And I don't know what price it is. I mean, if $1 million is what the math shows is probably realistic from the diminishing return scenario, but diminishing returns doesn't seem to make sense once all the land in the city's bought up. I mean, right. We've seen this hundreds of times with gold in the past, but we've just not seen it with Bitcoin. And Bitcoin is infinitely divisible and actually finite. So it has more potential demand, and we know it has a lower supply. So anyway.
Well said. On this property topic, this is a great segue. I would love to get your thoughts on, I had Samson Mao on a couple weeks ago here, and he said that he, it's not that he was like adversarial against Michael Saylor. He just was like, I don't believe everything Michael Saylor says, or I don't see eye to eye. And his point was the gold rush thing, right? That he said in Madeira, and that the mining supplies, there's kind of like two facets to it. One, which I think he understood more once I explained it to him, but he didn't hear that talk. And he was just saying, so I'd love to get your thoughts on the gold rush, because you kind of alluded to it in the next 10 years, But Samson thought he was talking about the mining, and he was saying, well, most of the sats are already gone, like you just alluded to. But I think what Saylor was kind of alluding to again was what you just said, which is the real estate problem. Like there's only so much left. There's still a chunk of it left, but after 2034, 10 years from now, like it's done 99% plus. Like the island, you've gone to the north and now you're having to trek backward south, and you're now having to trade peer to peer with people because there's nothing on the exchange anymore. There's no free land. So I'd love to get your thoughts just on the gold rush and like kind of how Saylor was positioning that the next 10 years. And also the thing that Samson was saying about Saylor always says, or at least for a while, he's been saying, well, Bitcoin's property, the property thing, right?
Yeah.
Like it's property, it's property. He doesn't say it's currency. He doesn't say it's money generally. You might here and there, but generally he's always framing it as property. I'd love to get your thoughts on, do you think that's something that he's doing just because he's such a public figure and he's such a big figure that he kind of has to play within those rules? He's a public company, all these different things going on. Do you think it's more of that, or do you think it's something else? Because Samson's like, it's a money, like it's a currency, man. Like it's a money. So I would love to get your thoughts on those kind of those two things.
Yeah, well, I'll say this since you're asking so direct, but I spent, I don't know, half an hour or so with Mr. Saylor. Well, actually, it was right before that talk. It was right before the Gold Rush talk. So that's kind of a fun tidbit with that. But we were backstage or whatever. So we talked, and I asked him that actually, and it was regarding Samson. I think it was the next day or the day after. But Samson and I had dinner together, and we did a show together, and we talked a lot about that because Samson and Michael have disagreements. And they're, they know each other, decently well. I suppose, they've been on a lot of shows together,
Yep.
I mean, I have my disagreements with Saylor and I have my disagreements with Mao. Right. I mean, I disagree with pretty much everyone on something. Right. Yeah. So, I do disagree with them on certain things. I suppose what I would say to answer your question though about that is that Saylor definitely focuses on Bitcoin as digital property and as an asset and not as a currency. If someone's going to say, "Oh, that's because he doesn't understand Bitcoin," it's like, yes, he does, right? Because I'll hear people say that they're like, "Oh, it's because he's not really done the rabbit hole." It's like, he understands Bitcoin. He uses it as a unit of account. His presentations, he gives it as a unit of account. Like he gets it, right? Mm-hmm. Now, does he really believe it as a currency? I don't think he does. I think probably, he didn't give me a direct answer, but I think he would probably say maybe someday. But he's been very clear that he thinks for decades, if not centuries, the dollar is going to remain the primary daily currency, whatever, right?
Yeah.
And that actually, I think to your implication that he can't say otherwise, I think it's actually probably true. I mean, I can say whatever I want, right? I don't have Luke stock trading on the stock exchange, right? I think we got to keep in mind, Michael Saylor's got his company, he's got shareholders. He could be sued. He could have all kinds of litigation after him, right? From SEC and Wall Street, but also the government, right? If he was out there actively calling for the death and demise of the dollar and putting his money in Bitcoin, that's, actually kind of like what we were saying before in the conversation, that's not going to be an optimistic pitch for people to come to the Bitcoin side, right? And also it's frankly probably not true, right? We probably don't have hyperinflation, in the next short period of time. I do think hyperinflation of the dollar is inevitable. The only question is when, and I do think it's a long time from now. I think part of the reason he says that is that he is a billionaire. He has been a billionaire for decades, and so his bias is probably more towards an asset as a currency, right? For people like where I've been in South Africa or El Salvador, it's much more of a currency, right? Or Guatemala too, right? They don't use it as a store of value. They use it as a currency. People in Guatemala, they may not have enough money to save, but they can use Bitcoin, save 10% on their transaction by avoiding credit card fees, to them, Bitcoin's more of a currency than an asset, right? And that, I think, for the bottom 2-3 billion people on the economic ladder, Bitcoin first and foremost is going to be the medium of exchange, first and foremost be the currency, then the asset, right? Because for them, that's what they need, right? For the people like Saylor, and more importantly, the people he's talking to, the Wall Street guys, the billionaires, the nation states, that's the story, right? For them, it's an asset, right? And so that doesn't mean inherently one's more true than the other, right? I think both are true, and I think probably he feels like he has to stay closer towards the asset spectrum. So, I don't know about between Samson and Michael, their private conversations. I mean, I think, Samson would lean much more on the currency argument, Saylor much more on the asset argument. I don't know if there's a mutual understanding between them, that it's just they're talking to different people, and probably there is, but I think I think this is why it's important for people to be careful with the words, because words matter, and yes. I think Saylor is just a case of he's being very precise with his words. So anyway, that's regarding that discussion. With the gold argument, I mean, yeah, I think he's right. I mean, I don't know what more you want me to say to that. I mean, the gold rush is another good metaphor, right? It's like we have only just discovered gold in California in the last 15 years, and we're all going out there and picking up gold off the ground, right? Is it free? No, because you had to walk out there and pick it up. But we are yet to enter the point where there's no more gold left on the ground or in the rivers. Now we got to dig, right? I think that's kind of where Bitcoin is. We're ending the period where there was Bitcoin just laying around in faucets, people giving it away, people zapping sats to each other, Bitcoin just sitting on exchanges you could exchange fiat for. Right? I think we're getting to the point where, that's not available. The gold from the river is gone. All the land in Manhattan's claimed. Homesteading land rush is over. Now we actually get to the margins, and price is set at the margins. Market cap is downstream of price, and so I think that's optimistic both for the asset and the currency perspective, and it just depends. Are you a billionaire, or do you have a net worth under $1,000?
I will. We can transition a little bit here, because I don't want you to have to mind read too much. I don't want to play in the cognitive dissonance world too much and get into other people's heads. So I appreciate you amusing us a little bit. Speaking of analogies, earlier we talked about numerous different analogies. Your writing. So I've talked to you about this probably a year ago or so when we had lunch, and your writing really strikes a chord with people. What do you think it is about your writing? A year and a half ago, you wrote the piece, you wrote a few pieces, and a couple of them really caught on, and got circulated, obviously. And what do you think it is about your writing that you see? Some people have it, like again, Aladdin with Bitcoin trading cards. His genius, his own, is community, understanding people and kind of how they tick. You seemingly have that in you as well. That's something that I wish I had more of. Just being a big burly jock, that's not something I have as much. So I idolize. I shouldn't say idolize. That's probably not a great word, but I look up to people like you.
Respect it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I respect and I look at people like you or Aladdin or certain people I know that they really understand humans. Like they really get humans, and they there's something in them that they can really relate to other people's, empathy or whatever it might be. But what do you think it is that makes your writing different than the average person who's out there writing, and yours just strikes a chord? I mean, everything you put out there seemingly just, whether it goes viral or not, it goes mini viral. Like you get your ratios are excellent, probably some of the best out there. So what is it about you and just the way you're able to relate with people?
Yeah, I mean, not a lot of people, but certain people that don't like me, let's say, think I only do this because it's popular, you get so many likes and clicks. But it's like, they don't see the very negative emails, DMs, whatever's I get, and I do get a decent number of them. I actually keep a list of all the insults I've been called. I mean, it's literally, I don't know, maybe 100 or, I don't care. That's my point. It's like, I was doing this before literally anyone cared. Like I was making slideshows and doing presentations when like 5 people from college would show up and like hear me out. And of course, just whatever. Right. So I mean, cause again, this is the obsessed end of the rabbit hole where it's like, oh, I'm not in Bitcoin because I want to be rich. I mean, yeah, I do, but I'm in Bitcoin because, like, again, we have this war between Israel and Iran. We have the war between Ukraine and Russia. I mean, political money accelerates the incentive for the military-industrial complex, right? I mean, it actually, as a quick side note, this gets back to Saylor. Saylor has a lot of opinions about the CIA and the government and the history of America. I know he has those, and he doesn't talk about them for the same reason, right? And it's like me too, right? Like, I mean, if one really wants to be honest and again pursue truth, like if you look at the things governments, including America, has done, like you quickly realize that the Bitcoin, the hyper obsessed people like me in Bitcoin are not in it because we want to make tens of millions of dollars. We're in it because we think tens of millions, conservatively, of lives can be saved or indirectly saved, right?
Yes.
Or at least we can lower the probability of negative consequences, right? So anyway, that side note aside, I think people resonate with the stuff I do because they can tell that I've been doing this for a while, and they can tell I care about it, and that's my point I'm making. So I don't care if people like it or it goes viral or not. I want to do it one way or the other, and I can't justify my time doing anything else. Like I couldn't be at peace with myself if I was doing anything else, knowing that this thing is here, subs here. And now that I have gotten into this world and people respect me and people think I'm smart, and I don't know, like now that I'm here and people are going to watch this conversation, which I couldn't have believed 2 years ago, or a year and a half ago even, but now that I'm here, now I have to double down. Like I can't back out because now, not only is this important, I got to contribute to it because I think it's important, but now actually it seems like me specifically is on a small level important in this, right? Not that it's about me. That's not what I'm saying, but it's gone beyond from the mission's important, I got to serve it, to now, the mission, or some people also on the mission have incorporated me into the mission. And now it's even more important that I contribute. Right. So, I mean, I think people resonate, frankly, because people need stories. People need to have a story told to them. I mean, and this gets back to the unit of account thing, right? People tell themselves stories of Bitcoin, even if they hate it. They tell themselves a story that's too volatile. They tell themselves a story of the S&P 500, right? I mean, someone to say, I save my retirement in bonds and stocks, and the bonds and stocks go up in value every year. The story they tell themselves is that it's because America's getting more valuable, the economy's doing well, and the stock market's going up, and that's what they tell themselves. That's the story they tell themselves. They have never in their life heard the story. No, it's the same value, but the dollars at which you're measuring it from within are now worth less. And you are mistakenly associating the technological gains of deflationary progress and more innovation. You're conflating that with the debasement of the currency which you're measuring it within. Right? And most people have not heard that story. And so I think when someone comes out and says that story in a way hopefully people can follow, I think that's when, it kind of is the light bulb moment, right? And this is, I got a lot of criticism, my first few months, doing Bitcoin content, because a lot of people thought, people now may not believe me when I say what I'm about to say, but people thought I was paid to say these things. They thought I was sponsored by some company. They thought maybe I was a government spook. They thought, surely he's using AI to write his stuff. I've never used AI to write my stuff. Maybe I will in the future, but I don't now, right? I'm not funded by anyone. Well, I wasn't then. Now, obviously, I work in Bitcoin full time. But my point's that people didn't believe it because they're like, that was so meteoric. You were nobody, and then you were everywhere, right? And like, I can't believe it. But because again, I thought, what do I have to add? I don't have the experience. I've not been a Wall Street CEO. I've never stood on a stock exchange trading floor before. What could I possibly know? But it turns out what I knew was to appeal to people where they are, right? And I think most Bitcoiners don't have that skill. They just go over people's heads, right? They sit at Thanksgiving dinner and lecture their family about how they're crazy for not buying Bitcoin. But like, look, you're going over their heads, it's like, you got to have them care first, right? I guess that's encouragement to anyone watching. It's like, you got to, the people in your life that you're trying to orange pill, quote unquote, it's like, you got to accept they're not going to listen to you until they care. And most of them probably, sorry, but they're just not going to care, because most people don't care enough to overcome the difficulties with pursuing truth to actually understand, right? And so, anyway, I think the reason people like my stuff was that I could tell a story, and I think I thread the needle between truthfulness and useful oversimplifications pretty well. I think a lot of people get too far into the oversimplification and metaphor world to where it's not really helpful or true. And then I think a lot of other people are way too factual and way too correct, and it doesn't apply to people. And I think it's a fine line to say something that is in the heart true and helpful, but perhaps factually is incorrect, right? And so, like many of the things I talk about, I think, factually may not be true, but in heart it is true, right? Like, I could give a lot of examples, and perhaps I should now that I said that. But like one example is, do I really think Bitcoin's going to save 10 million lives? Like, no, it's a number on a screen, obviously not. But every year 4 million people die needlessly because energy is too expensive, right? Like for every winter, 4 million people die from disease or cold exposure, right? I mean, we have a monetary system that artificially forces the cost of energy to go up every year. If we had a monetary system that reduced that by half, that's potentially millions of people every year. Go out a century, that's 100 million people. Forget war, forget, healthcare artificially becoming more expensive, housing artificially becoming more expensive. So it's like, do I literally think Bitcoin is backed by electricity? No, but it is. Is Bitcoin literally going to save millions of lives? No, but it is. Is Bitcoin a monetary singularity? No, but it is. I mean, it's like, and I think, I think it's a difficult thing to bridge to understanding that people can relate to with understanding the heart of what's being said, right? And again, actually, I think going back to Jeff Booth, Michael Saylor, and Alex Gladstein, I think all three of them, one thing they have in common is all three of them do that really well. Alex Gladstein does that really well from the humanitarian perspective. Jeff Booth does it really well from a technological perspective. Michael from a asset preservation perspective. And I think, I think that's a hard thing, is to realize that to share truth, you have to meet people where they are. And I think Bitcoiners, because we're so early, we're so far in the end of the curve, the bell curve of, we get a little more into the psychopathic, obsessed, weird world. They're so hyper obsessed with, just the way we are about truth, is that we forget that we got to meet people where they are. And sometimes, in order to meet people where they are, you have to grit your teeth and endure the oxymorons or endure the oversimplifications, like pricing Bitcoin in terms of dollars, or like using metaphors. Do I think Bitcoin is literally the gold rush? No. Do I think Bitcoin, I think that's something very hard for people to do. And I think most Bitcoiners are on one end of the bell curve where they're super hyper specific, and on the other end, people just don't care, right? Like, a good example, because I do get negative criticism for that, but one example I always like to give is that of the solar system, right? It's like, if you're going to try to explain to somebody that knows nothing about the solar system what it is, like, first you got to establish the Earth is not flat. Then you got to establish the Earth goes around the sun. Then you got to explain what planets are and moons and the asteroid belt. And, it's like, there's so much complexity. Yes. And most people are at the Earth is flat stage. And the Bitcoiners know about the atmospheric composition of Neptune, right? I mean, it's like two different extremes, and you got to have somebody in the middle say, you got to have someone bring in the kindergarten explanation of the solar system with the maps and the charts and the visuals that aren't true, like, that are actually false, but in at heart and spirit are useful at helping people get to that next level and understand, right? And so I think, I mean, when that kind of, it was after my second or third Twitter thread article in early 2023 where all I'm kind of saying, rambling about hit me, where it's like, oh, that's my contribution. That's when it hit me. Where I'm like, okay, now I see why people care about it, because it's trying to help people understand something that we inherently can't understand yet, right? We're trying to understand future technology, and we're just, nothing is going to be factually true that we predict about future technology, but directionally, it's true, right? And nobody, by the way, nobody can predict that accurately. But anyway, so yeah, long answer short, I think it's just my stuff, my content helps people hopefully paradigm shift, meet people where they are, pricing things in dollars, pricing Bitcoin in dollars, reel them in, help them understand that, oh, wow, Luke is telling a story here. And I've also been telling myself a story, because most people aren't aware they're telling themselves a story, right? And that, I think, is the first step to realize, yes, I'm telling a story, but you've also been telling yourself a story. And the only question is, which story has more accurate bearings on the world? So, yeah.
Yeah. It's so well said. And I just think of, self-deprecating, empathetic, authentic, and you can tell a story, right? Coming from the film background and things that you've done in the past. So I think that's one of those reasons you kind of spin all that together, which it comes together beautifully many times. It makes me think of my friend, one of my good friends forever that I've had. He always say, "Don't let facts get in the way of a good story." Right. And it's like, you're directionally correct. It makes me think of The Invisible Age too, right? Bucky Fuller talked about this decades ago. Robert Kiyosaki kind of took that mantle. Ironically, Max Kaiser did too, actually a Bucky Fuller student as well. And talking about the invisible age and people not being able to see a lot of this, right? It's very hard for people to comprehend these things because it's ephemeral. It's in the ether. It's very hard. It's like we're going from cash, physical things, gold. Like, it's hard to bridge this gap somehow. And it brings me to Jesus, using parables, right? And not all these things in the Bible happened. Actually, he was using stories to make points to people. It was directionally correct. Doesn't mean it was all true, but he was trying to make points to humans because he knew, obviously, this is how humans learn. And I think that's you do a great job of that. In saying all of this, I know we're getting towards wrapping here soon. What do you think about the divine nature of Bitcoin? Do you think it's divinely inspired? I would love for you to give your two sats on this component of the argument. Talk about other end of the bell curve here. What are Luke's thoughts on where this comes into play?
Well, yeah, first I got to comment on the film thing, because this is something that I've just understood for most of a decade now, because I was in film from back when I was very young. But, most people just don't realize, like, pretty much everything in a movie is a lie. Like everything in the movie is a lie. Like, it's not true. And, the message, the meaning, the synopsis of the film, that can be true, but literally everything in the film is a lie, right? The actors are not actually feeling those emotions, right? The makeup is fake. The CGI is fake, right? And the storyline is fake. The characters are fake, right? The frame rate at which the film is filmed at is fake, right? Why do we choose 24 frames per second? It's because it is the closest approximation to what we feel like the Earth's speed is in a dream state, right? This is why some people do 24 frames, some people do 30 frames. You do 30 frames a second when you're trying to have realism, right? Like a documentary or sports or news or something like that. You're trying to do 24 frames a second when you're trying to give the feeling of a hyper conscious state, like dreaming or something, right? So literally everything in a film is if you want to be dramatic, a lie. I guess that's a little harsh of a word, but it's not true. Right? So I think that's well, not even exaggeration, because there's not even something there, right? And we actively celebrate. And we're not aware of that. We're so conditioned to them not being true that we actively celebrate. We actively celebrate movies when they get somewhere close to truth. Like, we celebrate practical effects. We celebrate method acting, and when actors like immerse their characters, because it's like the norm is everything's a falsehood. And so when something approaches being anywhere close to real, we just applaud it. So anyway, that's my little rant about that. But yeah, no, I don't think Bitcoin's divine. I mean, I
how about divinely inspired?
Well, that's I guess, yeah, we could go on a long conversation about
I
that,
know.
but yeah,
I'm
I
doing
mean,
part two
you know,
in the car
you
ride in
know,
a few minutes.
yeah, I think a lot of people. I mean, just yesterday, someone I know, someone I met when I was in Portugal for Bitcoin, the Bitcoin conference we were talking about
Mhm.
before. She just took up a Bible. She just bought a Bible last week, I guess, or whatever, and started reading it. She's in her 40s or whatever. I don't know, 40s, 50s, and she said Bitcoin brought her to the Bible. I'm like, okay, great.
Wow.
I mean, but I think it's just that most people don't realize they've been telling themselves stories their whole life. Most people don't realize they haven't been pursuing truth their whole life. And then when they get into Bitcoin and they realize, oh, I've been telling myself stories everywhere in my life, my whole life. And oh, what is truth? I've never pursued any form of truth, religious truth, spiritual truth,
Yep.
familial truth, personal truth, monetary truth, right? And so I think people realizing that, oh, I've been telling myself a story, and people realizing, oh, I've I've been really wrong about. I think it encourages people to think critically and ask questions. In general, not even the spiritual aspect, but just secular. I know a lot of people that have said they want to get on a diet, start losing weight, get married, start a business, move, change jobs, whatever. In part because Bitcoin inspired them to do that, or really not even Bitcoin. It's their perception shift, and Bitcoin is just a catalyst in that. Many catalysts, right? But anyway, there are some people in Bitcoin that think Bitcoin is God. I do not believe Bitcoin is God. There are some people that believe Bitcoin or Satoshi, let's say, were divinely inspired or placed by God. I mean, I would say no, because I don't think Satoshi was uniquely placed, but I would say yes, because I think everyone's placed, right? So, I
Mhm.
mean, yes and no, I suppose. I think the reason people attribute divinity to Bitcoin is because it's based on math and it's outside of human oversight. So I understand that, but to me, it's no different than saying a wheel is divine, right? I mean, the reason the wheel is special is that has a perfect infinite circumference and pi, right? Infinite ongoing number that is endless, right? Like a square with curves, or excuse me, with corners, humans manipulate and make. So I mean, to me, that's kind of how I think of Bitcoin. That it's a wonderful tool, and in the same way, a perfect circle, reflects beautiful mathematical truths that are outside of human comprehension. I think Bitcoin, in many ways, because it's math based, is a beautiful, wonderful tool that reflects um, mathematical qualities of the universe. I think there's also the other component too, that money is a value system. Money is a priority hierarchy, right? I mean, this, like you said with Jesus, Jesus talked a lot about money. Many people have not read the Bible and they don't realize Jesus talked a lot about money. Why? It's not because money matters. He made that very clear. The money doesn't matter, but the way in which you orient your values and you orient your priorities and you orient, where your treasure is, your heart will be there also, right? And so likewise, that's why Jesus talked about money, because it's not that the money matters, but it's that the money is an indicator of where the heart is, right? And so, I think when people come to Bitcoin to reorient their priorities, they orient themselves away from the most numbers possible is what I want to the most times what I want, right? They transition from, I want the biggest number in my 401k. I want the biggest number of square feet in my house. I want the biggest number of cars, the biggest number of vacation days, to I just want the most time I have doing things that have an impact on the world, right? So I think Bitcoin inspires those things because it forces people to accept, I've been telling myself stories my whole life. It forces people to accept some of those stories are not true. It forces people to accept maybe my priorities have not been optimally oriented for some, if not the entirety of my life. And I think it also, another component is it breathes objectivity, right? Bitcoin forces people, I think, to look at the world more objectively versus subjectively, right? And I guess that's a longer conversation, but I think we're really losing that these days. I mean, we are forgetting that we're forgetting objective truths about the way the world operates now, and everything's subjective. There's my truth and your truth. And it's like, nope, there is objective truth. We have subjective opinions about what is objective truth. But, I think, for all of those reasons and probably a few more, I think people get into personal development, life development, spiritual pursuits, and yes, Jesus, as a result, directly or indirectly, Bitcoin, right? And again, it's a lot of it's semantics, but it's important, right? Like, do I literally believe Bitcoin is one of the greatest tools for advocating the gospel of the century? No, but yes, right? I mean, it's like it could be not true, but true, right? It's like, yes, because I think it's a catalyst for people learning about it, but no, because I think everything at the end of the day is God, right? So, there are a lot of nuance there, and the English language is not best at, nuance sometimes. But anyway, I don't think Bitcoin's God. I think it's a wonderful tool, and hopefully, really, this is the real reason I'm in Bitcoin. It's like, yes, I want to see Bitcoin go to $1 million and 10 million, $100 million. Yes, I want to see that, but more so I want to see purchasing power go up, and more so I want to see everything else come down in terms of Bitcoin, and more so I want to see the humanitarian case for Bitcoin become real and help save millions of lives. But really, at the end of the day, what I really, really, really want to get down to it is I want people to live best lives possible and live their lives in Jesus' name and not their own name. And, some people will, some people won't. I get it. Humanitarian case, people will always suffer. It's like, I actually don't like the phrase Bitcoin fixes the world, because I don't think it does. Like, the problem with the world is not the central bank.
Yeah.
There were problems in the world way before the first central bank, right? So, again, it's true, but it's not true, right? Like,
I was
it's
just
true.
Say,
it's true. I get it. It's a useful oversimplification. Fix the money, fix the world. I don't hate on people when they say that, but it's also not true, right?
Yes.
So anyway, the real reason I'm in Bitcoin is because I don't care about Bitcoin at all, and Bitcoin is a means to the end for helping human beings, right? And I think that is the main lie of fiat money, is that fiat money places controlling the money supply as the ultimate goal. But I think surpassing the need to do that at all, I think, is, being in control of the money supply is saying, I am God of this system. I can create energy out of nothing, and pride is the sin. Pride is the sin of the fall, right?
Yes.
Adam and Eve said, God, we don't want your rules. We want things our way. We want to build life in our own way. You said, don't take the fruit. We're going to take the fruit. And, we're going to be our own gods, lower G gods. And so, I think the Bitcoin rabbit hole forces people to accept, I've been within a system that worships a monetary god, right? Not that I think it's directly blasphemous, but that is what it is, right? Jerome Powell is the monetary god of the US dollar, right? You could argue it's a polytheistic religion with the different central bank directors, but I mean, that's basically what it is.
Dollar.
Yeah. And so if someone goes down the rabbit hole and realizes, humans, and ultimately this is perhaps the most important part, is that the reason fiat currency does not work is because humans are immoral. Is because there is no such thing as a good person. Even Jesus said, I'm not good, separate from the Father, right? I mean, and I think if someone really wants to be honest with themselves, and that's controversial what I just said, but if someone really wants to be honest with themselves, when they go down the Bitcoin rabbit hole, they will accept the only reason fiat doesn't work is because we can't trust any humans, right? If there were some humans that were good and some that were not, the ones that were good would win out, because their currency that they manage preserves purchasing power, the ones that don't. So I think when someone realizes the total depravity of man alone, they will accept that, of course it makes sense that a monetary system separate, that is the innovation of Bitcoin. Bitcoin separates monetary influence from human depravity, right? And that doesn't mean that Bitcoin is, God. That just means that it is a sign that things that have less humans involved generally are more moral and more good, right? And so the calling of Jesus and the calling of a Christian is go out, love those in the world, be in the world, not of the world, and accept that humans are totally depraved and humans are immoral, but that God still loves them and is willing to sacrifice himself, his perfect self, a perfect sacrifice for one, not, human beings cannot ever be a sacrifice. No amount of works we do is going to be enough because we're imperfect. We're an imperfect sacrifice, right? And that's why we need a perfect sacrifice. And so, a perfect monetary system outside of human depravity, I think, is a major, big orange directional arrow to other forms of truth, right? And not everyone will agree with me on that. And that's fine. I have my subjective opinion. They have theirs. And at the end of the day, there's only going to be one objective truth. So,
yeah,
yep.
Well said. Yeah, it's. I was going to ask you, I guess what you're hopeful for here in wrapping. I want two last like little things, but that's kind of answers it in a way. I guess is what you're hopeful about and what you're here for. It's funny because that I'm sure in a few months when we have a bunch of time to spend together, I'm sure we'll talk about this a lot, right? But it's like the 10 commandments. If you follow those, then any money works, right? It could be fiat, it could be anything, right? Like, if you just follow those, none of these other things would even matter. It wouldn't matter, right? Like Bitcoin works, fiat works, it all works. But here we are.
Well, so, and to backtrack a little bit, this is why I focus. Especially the second half of the conversation, a lot of people will click away from just because it's not Bitcoin number go up, but it's so important. Yeah, because if you don't accept on a first principles that you're telling yourself stories, if you don't understand these things, then you're going to buy Bitcoin and you're still going to convince yourself of stories that aren't true. You're going to buy Bitcoin and hold the ETF. When me and you, Brandon, and others, I would agree with, are trying to hammer home, it's nonsensical to own the Bitcoin ETF. If you could trust humans, we wouldn't have a need for Bitcoin. So why are you trusting humans with the ETF, right? It's like, most Bitcoiners, I think, I understand Bitcoin, but they don't really understand it from a first principles of why they ignore it in the first place, of what the main problems are. And so that's why they believe diminishing returns. That's why they believe that the ETF is a tolerable counterparty risk to have, right? It's why they believe these things, because they don't understand the building up what the problem is in the first place. The problem in the first place is not that the money is bad and now it's good and get any exposure to the price action of the new money and you're fine. It's like, no, the problem is human sin and human depravity. And so in economic terms, the problem is single points of failure, counterparty risk of the currency, right? Deprave the money from that, then you're good, right? ETF introduces that, right? So anyway, as a side note, it is really important both for the spiritual component, but also the money component. It is. But yeah, I mean, to answer your question, my hope is that we see a better world, right? I mean, I kind of mentioned this earlier, but 4 million people a year from energy costs artificially going up. How many people have died because healthcare is getting more expensive every year? How many people can't afford homes because homes are getting artificially more expensive every year, right? What about college? I was having a conversation with someone who's about to graduate high school last night. They can't afford college, right? 60 grand a year, whatever. It's like crazy, right? It's like, wow. How many people are needlessly dying or needlessly having lower quality of life, right? I mean, even things we don't think about, right? Lead poisoning, right? I mean, most people don't know how many people die a year from lead poisoning, right? Do we think about that, right? What about the fact that all famine is caused by political instability today, right? What about the fact, like I said before, that France is dumping their own currency on a 14 sovereign African nations, right? I mean, it's like literally, like, what is the fastest way to stop kids in Congo, mining for cobalt and suffocating under the ground, right? What's the fastest way to stop the 85-year-old woman in Eastern Europe freezing to death this year or getting a cold because she had the thermostat 5 degrees lower than where it should have been, right? I mean, It's like, what's the fastest way to accelerate all these things? It's detach human depravity from the monetary supply. And the only way to successfully do that is to create a mathematical algorithm that can sustain on its own. And the beauty with technology is not that technology is a god, but it has enabled us to achieve that major milestone that, we can have computers and electricity and the internet manage this for us to where we don't know how to stop it, right? Humans know how to divert an asteroid from hitting the planet. We have run experimental tests. We have actually had probes hit asteroids and move them significant distances, right? We know how to do that. We do not know how to stop Bitcoin. That is the innovation with Bitcoin, right? That's the innovation, that if we separate the brokenness of man from the base layer monetary system of the world, the second order effects, even if not directly true or literally true, the second order effects are extremely true. And, I think the difference of Bitcoin and no Bitcoin is hundreds of millions of people in the way. And I don't think you have to be wildly absurd to extrapolate that out, in a working career, right? And obviously, if we lower the probability of World War III in the process, that'd be nice in that, right? And I think,
Yes.
yeah. So anyway, that's my hope. Help as many people as possible. Help as many people retire as possible, and help as many people pursue truth as possible. I'd rather be poor and pursuing truth than rich and believing lies.
Yeah, couldn't agree more, brother. It makes me think of Jeff Booth. I don't know if it was with Nico or it's this weekend at Cheat Code. One of them I was watching, who was just saying, like World War I never ended. Fighting over money,
Right.
you just alluded to. It made me think of it. Just the human death, whatever, 100 million people dead over the last century just because of war, fiat wars going on, just insanity.
Well, yeah, and I guess one more point I should say is that 18 million people died from the pandemic in the last 4 years. Well, no, not from the pandemic, but in the last 4 years,
In the last
2020
4 years, yeah.
until now. Well, yeah, actually, this is a great place to end. It wraps up your question.
Yep.
We are filming this April 18th, the day before the Bitcoin halving, right?
Yep.
Let's think about all that has happened in this last halving cycle. We had the pandemic, we had the lockdowns, we had the riots, we had the protests, we had the supply chain issues, we had China ban Bitcoin, El Salvador adopted Bitcoin, Michael Saylor adopted Bitcoin, we had the ETFs. We had so much happen this last halving cycle. And so if we think forwards, so much more is going to happen to Bitcoin this upcoming cycle. And then in terms of quantifying the negative effects of fiat, 18 million people in the last 4 years died that statistically should not have died. You had a projected curve of how many people are going to die from old age or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
18 million is the official number that died these last 4 years, this last halving cycle, that should not have died. Roughly 6 million of those 18 million are from the pandemic, are from COVID-19. And so you're left, if you're intellectually honest, you're left with a bit of a dilemma. Is it that governments are wildly, artificially suppressing the number of true COVID deaths, and it was actually 2 or 3 times higher than what's reported? Mm-hmm. Or is it that the inefficiencies that we caused by overreacting to the pandemic, and the inefficiencies we caused by destroying the monetary supply and everything else, blah, 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 and other things I won't get into, that's really something to think about, that Bitcoin very easily could save 100 million people. Like the COVID pandemic is nothing. It was nothing. Mm-hmm. Compared to a major war, forget a world war, a micro war, right? Between Pakistan and India, or between Iran and Israel, or, like 18 million people is nothing on the grand scheme of rankings of potential catastrophes this century, right? Like it's yes. There's 100 ways at which we can have way more people die, and so if Bitcoin just prevents one catastrophe the next 100 years, then that's 100 million people. If Bitcoin makes 10 catastrophes that are still going to happen 50% less devastating, then that's 100 million people. It's like, no matter which way you splice it, it's like the Bitcoiners talking about, oh, Bitcoin's going to save lives. It's not fear mongering, and it's not crossing your fingers and hoping for hyperinflation and a worse world so that people will by force adopt Bitcoin. It's the only rational, optimistic stance to say, hey, having human depravity and human oversights and human subjectivity attached to something that should be separate from human emotion, that should be separate from human subjectivity, and instead should be objective and mathematical based. Like, hey, this inefficiency might be causing millions of people needlessly to die. What if we just detach that? It's like, that's 18 million these last 4 years, plus that'd be 25 million from the lack of heat, millions from hunger. Probably if we really want to quantify it, this last Bitcoin epoch, probably 40, 50 million people died. That their death was in many ways partially accelerated or contributed by the inefficiency of money. And if you don't believe me, I mean, like, only 20% of the world has property rights, right? I mean, it's like, shouldn't you expect that when 80% of the world doesn't have medicine, that the single greatest humanitarian case you could have is bring more medicine to the world, right? It's like this, it's the same thing with Bitcoin, right? 80% of the world does not have property rights or monetary rights. They can't save for a rainy day. They can't save their retirement. They can't feed their children enough. They can't afford healthcare, right? It's like, this is, right? This is the great, right? The great calling, right? It is go out, love the people of all nations. And Bitcoin is a means to the end of loving other people, right? The Great Commission, that's what we're looking for, right? The Great Commission from Jesus. Go out, love people in my name, through the whole world, all the nations, right? I mean, to me, that's Bitcoin. I don't care about Bitcoin. I care about the end. Bitcoin is a means to the end of loving other people. And, I think increasing property rights from 20% having a bad store value, the US dollar, to 50 or 80% having a great store value, I think, I don't know. It's pretty compelling, and in the process of Bitcoin goes to $100 million. That's great.
Yeah. Well said. Yeah, well said, as very few could say it the way you do.
Hopefully more do.
Well,
I don't want to be special. I want everyone to say these things.
Yes, we're getting there. The adoption, right? And in saying that, to help with adoption, the Bitcoin trading cards, we have a special to end the show here. We have a special new game sponsored by Bitcoin trading cards. It's be a word, just a word association lightning round. I have like a dozen or a little over a dozen and a half words, just lightning round, whatever you think of, the word that comes to your head, whatever. We'll rock through them here to end it out.
Okay.
All right. Satoshi Nakamoto.
Probably brilliant. I mean, he was. So. Yeah.
Michael Saylor.
Visionary, probably. He's got a very good. I think he's got a good vision of the future.
The United States.
Powerful.
Jesus Christ.
Lord.
Humility.
Underrated.
I love that. That was perfect. Faith.
Underrated. I just come up with a different word. Misunderstood. Misunderstood. Again, the story most people tell themselves of who Jesus is and what faith is wrong. They haven't even heard the story of what he actually is. I was at a Bitcoin conference talking to a now friend who was an ex-pastor at a very large church, and now he's not a believer, but he was a pastor, and he never, he asked me what my version of the gospel is, which I believe is hopefully, Lord willing, Jesus's version. And like, he told me he never felt like he heard that before. I'm like,
wow.
But this is a little rant, for both the Christians and the non-Christians alike listening to this, but it's like the people Jesus despised the most were the Pharisees preaching the false gospel, right? That Satan's best tool is a false Jesus Christ. That's the best tool, right? And likewise with Bitcoin, who do the Bitcoiners get mad about? Do they get mad about the politicians sending out drone strikes and killing people in the Middle East? Or do they get mad about the people promoting the altcoins, right?
Yep.
Like Bitcoiners emotionally, like I think objectively, get way more mad about the Bitcoin copycats than the actual people killing actual people, right?
Absolutely.
The biggest threat to Bitcoin are the fake Bitcoins, and the worst, the most evil people on the planet in Jesus' eyes are the people with false faith. So yeah, I'd say misunderstood. I think most people, including Christians, haven't read the Bible and they don't know what Jesus was all about. Anyway,
that's so good. That
wasn't a one-word answer.
No, we'll say that for another time at a later date. We will get into that because believe you me. All right, back to the lightning round.
Yes.
Mentorship.
Helpful.
Mm-hmm. Women in Bitcoin.
Oh boy. Oh wait, women in Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Oh man. Pioneers. Vast majority of people in Bitcoin are men between 35 and 75. So I think I'm a pioneer for the young folks. I mean, I don't know if anyone in Bitcoin world's noticed. Not a lot of people under 30,
Yep.
and not a lot of women. But the women are pioneers.
I like it.
So good for them.
I like it. Debt spiral.
Inevitable.
Jeff
because
Booth.
it is.
Yeah.
Jeff. Oh man. Just intelligent. He's so smart.
Yeah. Cold storage.
Essential.
Politics.
A clown show. I mean, it's like it is.
Yeah, true. A film or the arts.
Let's say in need of revival. Maybe in need of revival.
Yes. Legacy media.
Stuck. I think the legacy media is stuck. There's so much information but they kind of don't really have a choice. Their big funding agent is the government, and
true.
If they were trying to do the right thing, they destroy their business model. So I think they're stuck.
Hyper Bitcoinization.
A dream. Right now, it is a dream. Give it 5 or 10 years, I think it'll be much more realistic. But yeah, hyperinflation of the dollar is not happening anytime soon, but it will happen. So, yeah.
Stainless steel or cast iron?
For what? Like what? Seed plates cooking. Or like? Oh, for cooking? Oh, it's irrelevant. I don't care. I don't know. I'm sure that's a rabbit hole. I'm sure there's. That's like a controversy, right? Stainless steel, cast iron.
It's just a typical Bitcoiner controversy, right?
I care more about what I'm eating, I guess. I don't
know. Rabbit holes, right? Bitcoin trading card.
Bitcoin trading cards, fun. They're fun. They're cool.
I like it.
People should not buy them to think they're going to get rich. They should buy Bitcoin, but some people have been surprised when I've told them how much certain cards are worth. So trading is fun. They're like ordinals. They're like ordinals, but better.
Right. They don't blow up the blockchain, at least, right?
Right.
They don't. Sats before packs, everybody.
Right. Sats before.
And then lastly, the Bitcoin advisor. Or better yet, tell me a little bit about that, if that helps. Tell me a little bit about what you're doing at the Bitcoin advisor.
Yeah, I don't have a word for it. Because I'm biased, so I don't want to. I would say that the Bitcoin advisor specifically, but collateral custody multi-sig in general, critical. That'd be the word I say. So I hesitate saying the Bitcoin advisor is critical. So I didn't want to say, because critical is what came to mind. I didn't want to say it for that though. But
the work you do there, is critical.
But the work itself is critical. I don't care if people hire me in the Bitcoin advisor or not. They just have to do it. Most people are not ready, right? I mean, there's 1.7 million Bitcoin on exchanges. If every millionaire got 1 million sats, then that means that for everyone else in the world, there's 19,000 sats left per person, right? So that means if someone owns half a Bitcoin, they own literally thousands of times more Bitcoin than what the average person would get if the average millionaire only gets 1 million sats of the Bitcoin exchanges. It's like,
wow.
Most people in Bitcoin, I think, are making the critical blow that Alex Jones made, and they were not bullish enough. And they have 1,000 generations of sats stored in a single sig in their house somewhere, or in their safety deposit box, or they've memorized it, or it's in an ETF, right? And like that's why I pound the table on it, because there are like the next 10 million people that adopt Bitcoin are gonna want collateral custody multi-sig, and probably at least 80% of the people in Bitcoin right now are also gonna want collateral custody multi-sig. And so, even for a portion, I had this question with someone yesterday who's very skeptical about what we do. He's like, but I don't want to blah, blah, blah. I want the non-KYC. I'm like, okay, fine. Like, have, 80%, your single sig, whatever. Like how many people are going to want, okay, let's say 1,000 generations of Bitcoin. Let's say it's $100 million in terms of purchasing power. Do you want $100 million in one custody setup? Or do you want at least two? And that other one, yeah, you're giving up privacy, but you get tax benefits, you get jurisdictional arbitrage, you get a helping hand, you have peace of mind knowing that the family's member is going to get. Like I don't think people understand what Peter is pioneering at Bitcoin Advisor. I don't think people understood what we've been doing since 2016, and I think it's going to be critical. Max Payne, I believe, is up, and if I am a government and I want to take the citizens' Bitcoin, and for the first time in history, I can't confiscate that Bitcoin with the barrel of a gun, what am I going to do? Am I going to manipulate price down and scare people into selling the Bitcoin? Maybe, if I'm stupid. But the smarter thing is print as much currency as I can, buy as much Bitcoin as I can, force the price of Bitcoin up faster than people's comfort models, right? If someone's got $1 million of Bitcoin and I'm a government, if I want to confiscate their Bitcoin and they've got it in self-custody, what am I going to do? Am I going to force price down, maybe get a 50% crash out of Bitcoin, put myself in jeopardy for not buying it, and maybe they'll sell me some of their coins? Or do I just print 10 times the currency of the next 6 months, and they've gone from owning $500,000 of Bitcoin to $5 million or $50 million of Bitcoin. Now they're panicked because they got all this Bitcoin in their house. They're scared about a criminal coming in and getting it, so they're just going to sell it. They're going to sell half on the market, right? Which way is going to get the self-custody person to sell me half of their stack faster? It's going to be me print the money, which I actually have control over, force Bitcoin price up, and the primary fear vector point is scare them into having so much money they can get rid of it and they'll still live a happy life. They can live on half their stack. It's too much stress for them, right? That is more advantageous for me, and the person can be more willing to sell it than me manipulating the price. So yeah, I do believe that collateral custody multi-sig, and yes, the Bitcoin Advisor has been providing this since 2016. Not a single client's ever lost a single sat. I'm proud of that. I'm the first American Bitcoin Advisor team member. I'm proud of that. I'm the youngest member on the team. I'm proud of that, right? People
Very
can do it, if they're super funds or Roth IRAs or 401ks, my last little point about this rant, it's April 18th, the week before tax day, we had so much business because people were just flocking to us demanding Bitcoin in their IRAs because it didn't occur to them until a week before tax day. It's going to be the same thing. It's like, except, because they could contribute to the Roth IRA, until the 15th, right? So anyway,
yes.
Collateral custody multi-sig, it's critical. People in Bitcoin right now don't think they need it, but I'm trying to tell people, if you think from first principles, you're going to want 10%, 30%, 90%. You're going to want some percentage of your stack, whatever it is, in this, because when this hits the fan and governments print their political currency into nothing, right? What's the price of lies? What's the price of truth in terms of lies? It's infinite, right? Like the Manhattan will run out, the gold rush, the gold nuggets on the ground will end. We will actually start pricing Bitcoin at the margins. Price will rip up, and people will shift from, oh my goodness, is Bitcoin going to crash 30% to, holy cow, it's up another 30% today. Like, I should have done this ago, And so, anyway, as a wrapping point, people got two options. They can hire somebody like the Bitcoin Advisor to help them do it, or they can spend 1,000 hours and do it on their own, right? Get their UTXOs, taxes, retirement accounts, et cetera, managed. Actually, you can't even do retirement accounts with a single sig. But the point is, hire somebody to do it or do it yourself. But when price shoots up, the cost to hire somebody is going to go up by a factor of 50, and you're going to have no time. So do it now, people. Trying to warn you. But most people are going to end up like Alex Jones, and they're going to have, oh, I had one Bitcoin, but I lost 80% of it on my laptop, and now it's worth $1 billion. Yeah.
Unbelievable stuff.
Yeah.
Unbelievable stuff, man. I appreciate you so much. Where can people find you at?
They can find me on YouTube, Luke Broyles, Broyles. You can find me on YouTube or on Twitter. If they want to learn more about my work at the Bitcoin Advisor, they can get a 5-hour course, free course on self-custody basics, a 38-page checklist for self-custody essentials. I've got a 5-step Bitcoin accelerator. If you're brand new to Bitcoin, a 5-step accelerator to take action today. All that stuff is free. Like, go to my YouTube channel, go to my Twitter. You'll see the links for that. everywhere. I talk about it all the time, and yet somehow people still don't see it. So, dude, check me out there, and it's a pleasure. Thank you, Brandon.
Appreciate it, Luke. Thank you so much for being a playable character.
Happy to.
Thank you for checking out this episode of the Playable Characters Show, brought to you by Bitcoin Trading Cards. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any of the future Bitcoin and financial experts we have on the show. Plus, we will be doing random big giveaways throughout different moments of shows of collectible cards, sats, merch, and more from guests, so you won't miss anything. This show does not constitute any investment advice, only freedom advice. Everything you see here is opinions from the host and the guests themselves, nothing further. Please don't trust, verify. For full transparency, I do lead marketing efforts at Bitcoin Trading Cards, where we are trying to spread freedom to all of humanity and orange pill the world one collectible physical trading card at a time by making things fun and easy to talk about that normally make you want to cry. You can reach me directly through my email, brandon@btc-cards.com, with any inquiries or playable character suggestions. See you on the next one.